Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever wondered why some protests just kind of fizzle out after a few days, while others literally rewrite the constitution of an entire nation? Today, we're going to explore the hidden mechanics of societal transformation. We'll look closely at the theories behind how change actually happens, and then see those exact principles vividly come to life through the incredible story of one of India's most profound historical figures. It's a fascinating look into the architecture of change.
So let's just dive right in by asking a really foundational question. What exactly separates a quick, fiery riot from a true unstoppable engine of societal transformation? It's super easy to look at a massive crowd of angry people marching down a street and immediately call it a movement. But sociologically speaking, there is a very distinct, measurable line between the two. And understanding that line is the absolute key to understanding how history is actually made.
All right, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to define what a social movement actually is, break down its anatomy, and then apply all of that to B.R. Ambedkar and the Dalit upliftment movement. We'll explore his fight against early discrimination and see how education became his ultimate catalyst.
Let's start right at the top with the academic framework, really defining what a social movement is.
To get our bearings, we're pulling straight from the Perear University's syllabus on social movements in India. It gives us this really rigorous, highly structured way to evaluate how people actually come together to advocate for or even resist massive societal changes. It's such a great resource because it completely strips away the raw emotion of a protest and just lets us look purely at the mechanics of group action.
According to the text, a social movement requires a collective and sustained effort. And I really want to highlight that word sustained. These movements naturally bubble up from deep, perceived inequalities or unaddressed issues, but they are never overnight phenomena. No way. Whether they take the form of peaceful protests, civil disobedience, or backdoor lobbying, they are long-term, gritty commitments. They require immense patience and organization to fundamentally alter the landscape over years or even decades.
And this contrast here is absolutely fascinating. Think about a spontaneous protest or a riot. It's totally unstructured, it's temporary, and it's usually highly reactive to a single inciting event. It burns bright and fades fast. But a social movement, that is a completely different beast entirely. It's built like a machine. It relies on strict structure, defined strategies, and clear leadership. It's intentionally designed to provide a durable platform for individuals to actually influence policy over the long haul.
Okay, so how is that change actually built? Let's look at the anatomy of a movement.
As you can see, movements are incredibly dynamic. They literally have to constantly adapt to government responses, public sentiment, and shifting media attention. They are strictly goal-oriented, striving for specific, tangible policy shifts rather than just making noise for the sake of it. And, crucially, they inevitably face fierce resistance. Real movements will always clash with institutions that deeply benefit from maintaining the status quo. Change is almost never just handed over willingly, right? It has to be strategically won.
To survive that inevitable resistance we just talked about, a movement needs a rock-solid foundation. Elements like a tightly shared ideology and highly organized leadership are the vital glue that holds the whole shebang together during tough times. Without a shared belief system and tactical leaders, a movement just fractures the moment it faces extreme pressure. Ultimately, the end game is achieving concrete, legal, and political influence, transitioning from shouting outside the system to actively sitting inside and changing its rules.
Now, let's take this theoretical framework out into the field to look at Ambedkar and the Dalit upliftment movement.
It's one thing to read sociological theory, but it's absolutely amazing to see it literally transform an entire nation. Meet Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, popularly known as Baba Saheb. He was a monumental force, an economist, a brilliant jurist, and a fierce social reformer. He campaigned tirelessly against the brutal, centuries-old social discrimination directed toward Dalits. His sustained effort culminated in him becoming independent India's very first law and justice minister and the primary architect of the Indian Constitution.
But to truly understand the deep societal resistance that birthed his lifelong empowerment movement, we have to look closely at the lived reality of his childhood. Ambedkar summarized the intense discrimination he faced with one stark, completely devastating phrase: no peon, no water. Let's dig into the roots of that resistance and the early discrimination he had to overcome.
Born in 1891 in the Maho cantonment into the historically marginalized Mahar caste, Ambedkar and his family were treated as untouchables.
In school, the segregation he experienced was absolute and humiliating. He and other Dalit children were given almost no attention by the teachers. They weren't even allowed to sit inside the classroom with the other students. He literally had to bring a gunny sack from home to sit on, ensuring he was kept physically separated from the rest of the student body at all times.
And just to get a drink of water at school, Ambedkar had to navigate this extreme daily exclusionary process. Because he wasn't allowed to touch the water or the communal vessel, he had to wait for someone from a higher caste, usually the school peon, to pour the water for him from a height. If the peon wasn't there, Ambedkar simply went completely thirsty all day. It is a visceral, everyday example of a societal structure explicitly designed to hold a specific group down.
But here is where we see sustained effort in action, utilizing education as a catalyst for real change.
Despite those immense, frankly insane daily barriers, Ambedkar utterly refused to accept the status quo. He realized early on that to build a true movement, he needed the intellectual tools to fight the system. In 1897, his family moved to Mumbai, and he became the only untouchable enrolled at Elphinstone High School. When he passed his matriculation exam in 1907, it was such a profoundly rare achievement for his community that they held a public ceremony and gifted him a biography of the Buddha, a moment that deeply influenced his future. By 1913, at age 22, he had moved to New York on a state scholarship to study at Columbia University.
He eventually earned doctorates from both Columbia and the Lenin School of Economics. But what's absolutely crucial here is that he didn't keep this elite education to himself. He used it as the very foundation for collective action. His rigorous education fueled a lifelong campaign of fierce advocacy. He published influential journals, negotiated for India's independence, and fought relentlessly for the political rights of Dalits. This lifelong goal-oriented mission culminated in 1956 when he converted to Buddhism, initiating mass conversions to help his community formally escape the rigid caste system.
When we bring all this together, the alignment is just incredible. Think back to our academic textbook definition of a movement. It fundamentally requires shared ideology, organized leadership, and sustained effort. And Ambedkar took the powerful ideology of equality, provided unparalleled intellectual leadership, and applied decades of sustained advocacy. He successfully moved from the outside in, taking the tools of his movement and literally drafting the equalizing laws of a newly independent republic. His life's work was the ultimate, highly organized social movement.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this framework. The next time you watch the news and see massive crowds marching or demanding change, think back to these sociological principles. Ask yourself, are you just watching a spontaneous, reactive protest that will fade away? Or are you witnessing the structured, goal-oriented, sustained effort of a true social movement? Understanding that difference is the very first step to understanding how our world actually changes. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning what you see out there.